Well, hello everyone. Thank you, Marianne. So Trevor and I are here to talk today about what we found with using AI to maximize just our workflows and what we found how we've been able to move fast and some of the specific tools for it. So first off, overview of what we're going to be talking about, types of tools, and then get into some of the specifics. So introductions, I'm Mike Biglan, the CEO at 20 Ideas. I have been doing work in software development for about 20 years now. Started 20 Ideas 11 years ago, and Trevor and I have been lucky enough to, I've been lucky enough to work with him for the last more than 10 years at this point. So we do a lot of stuff with AI, complex platforms, things in health tech and education tech, things where compliance comes in place. So we've been doing AI well before the LLM days. And I'll let Trevor introduce himself.
Yep. When I first started with Mike, one of the other projects we were working on was an introduction into the using AI for data analysis. I've worked in software for about 15 years. I started in game development, and then I ran into Mike at a coffee shop and have jumped into web development, and it's been really wonderful.
Excellent. So yeah, a little about 20 Ideas. 20 Ideas is about a team of 60, Oregon's largest software agency specializing in AI driven design, development. As I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of AI work well before LLMs, things in NLP, NER, in various spaces, though LLMs really changed the ballgame in a lot of ways. So we're going to talk about that, jump right into it. One thing first is just who is in the room here. We really are aiming at both talking to people who are on the ground, the solo developers, people that are using these tools, but also team leads who are working with multiple people using those tools, and founders at the same time in terms of getting these products built, how to move faster when executing. So we've heard some different quotes. Sooner than later, 80% of code is going to be written by Copilot. Well, maybe not Copilot, but in general, coding is definitely getting more and more ubiquitous in terms of how people are doing that. And no, he did not actually say that. We have 30% of Microsoft code is written by AI now. Google, I think, is at 25%. This is only going to get moving faster as some of these tools are finally starting to mature. And what we've seen the last 6 months is really some aha moments that continue to surprise us as we're going through this. Just in terms of context, 5x. That's essentially it's writing a week's worth of code in a day, which always makes me think of this line by Steve Martin. All I want is an honest week's pay for an honest day's work. You can move a lot more quickly. And just sort of in context, what we've been finding is more than 5x for a lot of different things. But really the context matters. There are a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of overload. And so some of it is trying to figure out what the right tools are. As I mentioned, the context piece of this is what type of development do you do? This is not the same for all types of development. If you're getting really into nuanced code, there are certain things it doesn't work as well with, but there are a lot of things that it's able to move very fast with in terms of the creating the code, in terms of double checks, in terms of tests. That sort of takes us into the different tool categories. People, I'm sure, know about the standard IDE assistants, vibe coding, CLI agents, more sort of integrated suites. We're going to talk a lot about CLI agents in this. In our minds, this is really about coding 1.0, sort of VS Code, moving to 2.0, Cursor, Windsurf, and then 3.0 is really, instead of just sort of having this assistant, you're really directing how that works and able to do that. So the IDs really help you with AI. They're AI-powered assistants, sort of extreme autocomplete, but really kind of that next generation. A few examples, Cursor, Windsurf mentioned. The next generation is really these CLI coding assistants. You can see some of these. You got Claude Code, Anthropic, Amazon Q, Google Gemini. All of these are just in the last 6 months. Some of them are in the last 1 or 2 months. And prices are changing. If you would have asked sort of 6 months ago, we talk $2,000 to $3,000 a month, and now some of these are linked to Amazon Q's at $20 a month. Google Gemini is bundling it. You can get a lot with Anthropic and Claude Code for the $200 a month max plan, which is something that we use a lot.
And to
And
speak
Trevor, yeah, I'll let you jump right in.
Absolutely. So the thing to call out that's really specific is that the command line agents that we just talked about there, they have the power that you have at the command line. They also tend to be at the cutting edge of performance. So as these models improve and as these assistants improve, they tend to be the first ones to get a lot of the new abilities and capabilities. Because they're running as command line assistants, they have access to all the tools that you do, and that enables really powerful workflows because suddenly you can start linking some of these tools together to work across full workflows. You can say, hey, go review this pull request and address all of the issues, all the comments that my coworkers brought up for me, and leave a comment saying, what you did to address it. Some of the things that we're going to talk about here in some of the demos I'll give will be about these other more novel ways of using them. We found really powerful workflows with just ideating and also with automating how we interact with some of our project management software. So some of the things that we found is that, using AI, we can give high level requirements and come out with even better requirements. We found that you can describe based on those requirements what, it can go and derive what tests it should run. We've had great luck with having code review happen. And then the other thing that we found is that just by asking it to generate prototypes and designs using low level technologies like HTML and SVG, we come out with some really impressive results that are really a lot easier for engineers to consume and the tools that they use to consume. So after this slide, I'll show you a personal project I've been working on where I haven't done any real styling at all because I've been spending my time doing all the features and stuff. But when I asked the AI, how can you give me some mock-ups of what this could look like? I'll show you the results there. I'll go ahead and share my screen actually.
Excellent. And one thing I want to just sort of differentiate this from vibe coding. Vibe coding is very much you put the prompt in and you get something out. There isn't a lot of sort of the craft and quality of what's actually going behind the scenes. It's much more about sort of here's what it's put together and it kind of functions or doesn't. And there's a lot of, for any professional developers, there's a lot that goes into what it looks like behind the scenes. And that's something that we take very seriously in terms of, yeah, we're not, vibe coding serves a purpose, which is, in my mind, prototyping. It's putting things together quickly, seeing them, but it's not for production platforms or systems.
Thank you, Mike. So I'll start with the terminal here. So this is the UI you get when you start Claude. And the way that you start Claude is that you end up in a directory in the terminal, you type Claude, and now you're on your way. Now you're going to be interacting with your code base. And so the UI that we want to improve here is this guy. So this is just like some finance thing that I made up, and it tracks various things and stuff like that. But I didn't spend any time styling it, and I have no idea where I want to go with it. And so in Claude, I have this prompt that I'll put in. Oops, not that prompt. Here's an example prompt I might provide. So applications find stock symbols, call strikes. The key part here is that after I describe what it does, I provide what kind of aesthetic I'm looking for here. I lean towards an aesthetic inspired by Patrick Bateman's business card. And the other key part here is the output. What am I looking for? And so what we found is that using stuff like just straight HTML, which has a ton of flexibility and stuff, you can actually come up with some really powerful prototypes and visualizations to get an idea across when you're coming up with solid UX. And so it's going to think for a little bit here. And there's another opportunity we found as well, is that while this is thinking, you can go and start working across other various things and working on what they have here. And so that'll be another demo we show up here pretty soon. And so in about 2 minutes or so, it'll pop out something that will look really nice. And so I'd like to show you what the last run did. Last run popped out this. And this feels nice. And I was able to specify the various animations, and I didn't specify any of this. It came up with it, right? And so where we would go from here is that, generally speaking, in a legitimate production grade project, is that this would all be part of the repo. We'd have a certain a directory, the documents or the design directory in our repo, where once these designs get, maybe I don't like, the position, or I want to try grid layout or something like that, I'd specify it and iterate until the whole team was happy. And then using this plus maybe Figma tool and some tooling we have, some, designs we have in Figma, and the actual application itself with all this documentation and data, we would then feed that into our CLI agent to go ahead and develop the actual final product here. And all of this makes the agent themselves much more successful. The more detail you can give these agents, the better. But what you saw is that I had that little paragraph. That's not a lot of detail what I provided, and came up with this. By working with these things, they can provide you more insights until you can come with that final prompt that's really detailed. And then you work with them continuously as you go to get it actually into a production application. Thank you, Mike.
Excellent. So some of the different concepts as you're working with this different workflow are, what are the things that suddenly matter more? What are the things, testing is always something, especially going to production, that is a key part of it. But testing in AI-driven development changes the ability. So one is AI can scaffold tests. So of course you can create tests a lot faster. You can create things, you can ideate about which tests in terms of looking at sort of existing code base or doing new with new features. You could really dig into edge cases a lot more in terms of coming up with those. Test-driven development becomes much more both sort of the ability to do it, but also how important it is, because what it does is it gives that ability to write the tests and gets that sort of that piece down here, the closing the loop. The closing the loop is really when code can test itself, when it's working on something and says, is this right? And then can it instantly test itself and then say, no, that's not quite right. You can have these closed loops that move a lot faster without having to have the human in the loop for those particular pieces, as long as you're structuring and scaffolding those tests correctly. And then that last one is really sort of the continuous test refinement. Tests are really the backbone of production software, is to have those both sort of the lists of manual tests, but of course the automated tests that go hand in hand with the systems. Anything to add there, Trevor?
At the end of the day, the thing that's really happened by introducing these coding assistants is that there's not too much of an excuse to not have your code have tests. The challenge can come from the AI can get a little bit too excited and start testing way too much, and it becomes more of a challenge of just sifting through it. And so that's where the human in the loop does matter, is to make sure you're guiding to actually get the tests that are the most effective. The other area this also helps is that, that goes from unit tests all the way to end-to-end tests. You can provide one of the next demo I'll walk through is, sometimes it's hard to derive what the end-to-end testing should be, and the AI can look at the requirements and then figure that out for you.
Perfect.
Another thing that's interesting here is that, like I mentioned with the tools, tooling before, is that there are a lot of command line tools that are very powerful. So GitHub, generally speaking, when you want to go and clone your repository to your local machine, they have used the GH command line tool. The thing that also gives you, though, is access to essentially interaction with the entire GitHub repository. And so what can happen is that you can say things like, hey, go look at all closed PRs that were closed in the last day, and then go update all of the related Jira tickets that are associated with them using the Atlassian MCP servers. MCP servers are technology that are specifically made to integrate a coding assistant, and you'll see these in the IDE coding assistants as well, that allow them to have more ergonomic access to the APIs that these services provide. And Atlassian's is pretty decent so far.
Excellent. So one of the things that comes up is how this sort of changes for teams. The culture of the experimentation, so sort of the open communications. One is what we've seen teams doing in a lot of cases is, one, they open up budgets to experiment with AI tools. This is not something where that has been figured out and solved. There are a lot of tools that are coming up, having good budgets to try different things out, sharing wins and failures, finding things that work. Sometimes it's not just sort of the tool, this is a good tool or a bad tool, but what tool, what process works well with what you're trying to solve. Again, context matters. continuous feedback loops, making sure that the team is communicating with each other, having those tight things so those insights trickle around to other team members.
And one thing I'll call for the budgeting for your team is that early on, a lot of the plans were all usage based, token based, right? And so if you had this, a lot of your teammates might feel like, oh no, I've done this work. I can't throw this work away because the tools will literally tell you how much money you just consumed. And you get this weird feeling that doesn't feel great. And you might start pushing for work that isn't quality. A lot of these tools now have subscription based monthly subscriptions. And I've had multiple teammates tell me, and myself personally as well, that suddenly I'm much more willing to experiment and find these novel things because I know I'm not burning a ton of tokens.
And as you're mentioning that, one of the cautionary tales, the risks is if your team is not paying for a tool, sometimes that means you need to be aware of what data are going into it. So sort of the brand of that tool, or if it's free, that might have implications that it's going to be training on your code for other purposes, is something that your organization or you might not want. So one other thing that comes up is as you are working with new tools and processes, as coding all of a sudden becomes so much faster, that can create new bottlenecks. So collaboration, you have these new AI-driven workflows, and all of a sudden, what does that imply in terms of coordinating reviews, merge conflicts, and maintaining visibility, what other people are working on? PRs, because you can create things so much more quickly. What does it mean for a PR to happen? What is the point, especially if you can have another coding agent or coding assistant that is jumping in and doing that PR? Is it about sort of the learning? Is it about the assistant learning? So some of these things, they change what the ways that in workflows that those things are happening. Trevor, do you want to jump in on?
Yeah, so something else that we've noticed is that because these assistants have this diverse set of tools, that roles, like, it's like we said, not just coding, right? Project management, design, they can all collaborate in this space a lot more easily now, and a lot more effectively in the regard that they can pull data and get summaries and stuff like that as well. And so if there is a glut of code review that needs to happen, sometimes they can use these tools to go and grab that data and summarize it and help the team figure out what to do next. And with these tools as well, because you can pull them down and run them, et cetera, and see the reviews so much quicker. Sometimes you can actually move faster with code review, which is really lovely.
Yep. And then onboarding with new team members, yeah, there's a lot of training and experimentation. And if your team is figured out sort of this perfect workflow, a new team member is going to come on, there might be some learning curves that they have to figure out to onboard to this new workflow. Can also, in terms of just how the team is operating from sort of metrics, those metrics are really changing in terms of estimation and how that happens. So quick recap, choosing the right mix of CLI and suite tools, treat AI as a director, work with it to plan, to orchestrate review. It's not just something that is about speeding up coding. Integrate it deeply with your stack and your culture of how your team is working together. Continuously iterate on both the tools and the processes. Someone in the comments I saw mentioned Claude Code and integrations with VS Code in general. There are a lot of integrations that we've been seeing as people are putting things. Cursor, Copilot is integrated into most of the different modern IDEs at this point. And so we're seeing more in sort of those things merging together. But we also see something that the IDE is kind of a framework and a structure that doesn't that likely won't be the thing that how people are coding in the future as things move on. It just doesn't sort of support the parallel driven development that we see as something that sort of takes things to the next level. Bringing that all together, there's something that we've been working on. Everything we've been talking about here is really the cutting edge of AI coding that we've been seeing. There are still a varied mix of tools. There's RuCode, there's Klein, there's all sorts of things. And some of them have really good sub-agent modification modes. You can do a lot of really interesting things, MCP libraries, and trying to sort of keep up which ones are good for which cases. As we've been working with all that, what we've seen is the need to kind of connect all these things, but still allow the freedom to choose the coding assistant of your choice and work with them with your own IDE if you want to, with MCP servers. And so we did build a tool called DevSwarm. We're going to be releasing it in the next month. But yeah, everything that we talked about in this particular demo is really about the the tools that we're doing. So yeah, we're gonna be releasing this. We're happy to give a handful of access before going live. Just put your email into devswarm.ai for sort of a sneak peek of what it looks like if you go there. But yeah, the biggest thing here is that we love to see how people are doing different things, what they're finding. Some of it's personas in terms of Claude personas. Some of it is about the command files. Those are more Claude code specific. People are doing really interesting things on that front.